provide some confidence to foreign businessmen who want to be successful in India, we would now invite Mr. Alex Levine of Innovation Experience Kerala to talk about business opportunities in Kerala. Alex hails from London and is based in Kerala and has worked closely with the Kerala government and other private businesses in Kerala to implement projects in various sectors, including renewable energy, waste management, etc. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, Sujit. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you. So, a friend of mine, I've been in London now for a couple of weeks. I actually fly back to Kerala tomorrow. And a friend of mine asked me, he said, tell me about Kerala. And what's some of the essential principles? And I thought for a second, I thought, whatever I tell you is true, the opposite is also true. And I think that's that's a good summation when talking about the business opportunities in Kerala. There are a tremendous amounts of opportunities. The opposite is also true. Okay? And so with that, my opinion is that to navigate, to really get the best out of whether it's business opportunities or any kind of venture that you might be looking at in Kerala, is really to understand the logic and the rules, the implicit rules, which I've been learning on a steady basis. I'm not from Kerala originally. I've been living there for about 3 years now. Maybe if I just share with you a little bit of context. I'm a businessman in the UK and Europe by training. So I was I had a strategy business advising companies like Shell and Philips on their long-term strategy. I latterly set up a crowdfunding platform for renewable energy in the UK, which I encourage all of you who are residents in England to look at. So it's called Abundance. I came over to Kerala actually because I reached a point in my life where I wanted to do some kind of, let's say, something more for society. So I actually worked with an organisation called, for Malayalis here, you may know Kantari, the spicy chili. They're an organisation run by a very inspiring lady who is blind from Germany called Sabrina Tenberken, and they have blind people who come from all over the world who've in some way overcome their disability and who want to set up social projects. So there's people from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, all over the place. And I came there to work with them, really to help these people to develop their project. And after some time, actually around a few months in being in Kerala, I was sitting with a number of the business people, and there's a small community, and we sort of became friendly with a number of them. And they were all complaining. They were all saying, oh, Kerala is such a difficult place to do business, you have to come down to Kerala, these kind of words. And I was sitting there and thinking, well, maybe we need to reframe things a little bit. And I actually suggested there was a globe in the room, and I actually took the globe and I turned it upside down, and I said, well, actually, if you turn the globe upside down, Kerala is actually in the center of the world, and from a social point of view, is exactly where it needs to be, between Africa and Asia. And that got them thinking, and I've suggested to them, what if we thought about Kerala or the region as potentially being a hub of innovation in some way? What would that look like? And that actually sat with me for a while, and I thought, well, actually, that's quite interesting. So if we think about innovation, clearly, Kerala is not set up to be a place that could compete with Silicon Valley in terms of industrial innovation. Yeah, there is hardly any industry there. The opposite is also true, I'll come to that. But there is hardly any industry there. And but in terms of social innovation, for example, there's a very deep legacy. Kerala is the home of Ayurveda. It's the home of the world's first martial art, Kalaripat. It's the home of Kudumpashri, which is a women's empowerment organisation which has over 3.5 million members. Even though now it's a government organisation, it's really, in many respects, a tremendous model for the world. And actually, you've got 100% literacy, and I'm constantly meeting Malayalis who speak better English than me, which is great. So my objective today is really to talk with let's say, my opinion, my perspective. These are my thoughts I'm going to share with you in some of the industries that you may be involved with or representing my opinions on what some of the opportunities are and what some of the risks are. This is not professional advice in the formal sense of it, so it's purely my opinion. For those of you who don't know Kerala, just for a bit of an idea, and to further this idea, or let's say to support this idea of Kerala being a place of contradictions. On the one hand, as I said, you have 100% literacy in Kerala. On the other hand, you've got very high youth unemployment. And over the years, well, as many of the Malayalis here will testify, what this meant is that there's been an exodus. So I think that, you can see a lot of people who want to do business and want to be successful in business will go to America, to the UK, to the Middle East, of course. And what that's meant is that around 25% of GDP for Kerala is from foreign remittance. Recently, the planning board for Kerala released a document for a 2030 vision for Kerala. And it's full of good data. It's not very well put out. I like to think about the future. I want something inspiring. But anyway, but certainly the information is interesting because once you strip away foreign remittance and once you strip away tourist revenue, there's actually been negative growth for some time now. Okay. Now, for example, if we think about infrastructure as well. Kerala is one of the only states in India not to have its own expressway, for example. Many of you will know already, there's a political situation, which is that every 4 years there's a changeover of government from Congress to communist, and that's been playing out for quite some time. There's different indicators that will point to different things. Let me talk about a few different industries. I mentioned about manufacturing earlier. So, just to give you an indication, energy use in Kerala, energy is always a good way to benchmark, the degree of industry. Let's say, for example, the daytime energy use. The 57% of energy used in Kerala is for residential use. Okay, so there's an indication there's not much industry. When I say industry, I mean heavy industry, manufacturing, consumer goods, and so forth. However, there are some areas where there's actually some very successful examples of manufacturing, and I'd like to point to one company, is a company called Termo Pempol. Pempol, they're the world's largest maker of blood bags. They do a whole range of medical devices in that field, linked with blood. And actually they were called Pempol. They were acquired by a Japanese conglomerate called Termo. And I think it's a very good example of actually a success for manufacturing in Kerala. They employ over 1,500 people within a plant in Kerala, in Trivandrum. Actually, for those of you from Kerala, in Villapalasala, which is itself a very controversial area, but I shan't go into that now. And they've been very successful. So usually the obstacles that people might think about in manufacturing in Kerala, the fact that you have to go to 32 different departments to get signed off, the fact that you've got unions who could, at any time flare up, and so on and so forth. Well, here's an example of a company which has global distribution, which has all of the latest ISOs to the highest standards in its factories, and runs a very efficient operation, and has an EBITDA of about £35 million, which is not insignificant. So I think that if I was going to say what some of the opportunities were for manufacturing in Kerala, I think that for those organisations that are keen to have a bridge between manufacturing and research organisations, there's a tremendous amount of research activity that is not being commercialised. So there's government bodies, CSIR, Sri Chitra Institute, for example, in the medical devices field, in various other fields as well. In colleges, we've got the College of Engineering in Trivandrum, which we do a lot of work with as well, where there's a huge amount of stuff being developed, and at the point of it being developed, nothing happens. So one of the things I'm asked about constantly is how can we commercialise stuff, which is probably good news for many of you here. So I think for those people looking to do manufacturing where they want to actually link very closely with research and development institutes, there's some interesting things there. And secondly, access to capital. For small manufacturing units, there's a big push by government to support this financially. And in particular, there's a gentleman who's taken over the Kerala Finance Corporation, a lovely gentleman by the name of Joy Uma. And he really wants to create a manufacturing, if not a boom, but certainly some kind of wave within Kerala. Now, what that means in practice on the ground, and certainly where part of my interest is that, for example, at a cottage industry level, you could have a group of 5 women, for example, particularly addressed at women, who can get an interest-free loan of up to 4 lakh per person, so that's 400,000 rupees per person, so 20 lakh in total, which is coming on for about 30,000 pounds, if my maths is correct. I've been out of England for a while, so that's not bad, and it's interest-free in a place where your average retail savings account is between 8 and 10%. So that's the good news. Let me talk about infrastructure. Again, I mean, on paper, there's tremendous opportunities for infrastructure projects in Kerala. If I look at transport, for example, even though there's a wonderful train system, still there's huge opportunities for upgrades. The roads are narrow very often. As I said, there's no expressway. Let's say the quality of the roads is often very poor. I've been through so many suspensions on my car that I drive now. Whether you're looking at wholesale infrastructure projects, maintenance projects, those kind of things, on paper there's a huge amount of opportunities. In practice, you've got some very good examples of high-profile projects where there's a strong argument for either return on investment or social benefit that have simply been stuck for years. Some of those, many of you will know, for example, there's a deep port in Vizhinjam. The idea is that this will be the second deepest port in the world, and it's been stuck for years. It's become highly politicized as a project. There's the Kochi Metro, and even with the gentleman who so successfully rolled out the metro in Delhi leading the project, that even despite the genuine honour that people felt that he would come down and work on the project as well, still that project is getting stuck. Even though this was one of the flagship projects at the Emerging Kerala conference last year that was designed to really mark a kind of a wholesale shift in thinking, to be more open, to be more investment friendly, still it's being held up. And this is one of the challenges. So I say the opportunity is that yes, there's just loads of things you can do to add value, and that will make people's lives better. One of the challenges is that just get it through the political process. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons it is that it's very easy for people to lodge objections, and to lodge objections that actually stick. And what you'll see at the moment, for example, in Kerala, with solar power, for example, there's also, I think for the last 5 days, the assembly in Kerala has not met because it's been blocked by the Communist Party, who are trying to go for the chief minister, who's Congress. So there's opportunities, but there's challenges as well. Let me talk about the energy sector. Some of you may be, I was talking to one gentleman before who's involved in the waste to energy project. Actually, energy is something that I'm very closely involved with. In the UK, we created, as I say, a finance mechanism for clean energy in the UK, for mostly wind and solar projects. I'm very interested. When I first arrived in Kerala, experiencing a power cut, for an Englishman who's sort of, being without a fan for an hour is, it's a bit of a struggle. In fact, even on occasion, I've learned that somehow just putting your head in the freezer for about a few seconds is very interesting, but not very energy efficient, I should say. Well, power is something that's very interesting, and I was quite surprised that even in a place where there's a lot of sun, where there's not necessarily the access to energy or the installed capacity, that there wasn't more solar, that there wasn't more wind. Part of my work is working on the ground and actually training. We've set up a unit where we train women who maybe haven't had, or who maybe are a bit marginalised, for example, how to do solar installations, installing solar streetlights, and various other things we've developed. But we're also working with the chairman of the incumbent of KSEB, the electricity company, and I've been doing financial models for him to say what would it look like to have 30% of the state's energy coming from, for example, distributed solar, which, by the way, I think is the best approach for Kerala, in my opinion. So currently in Kerala you have about a 3 gigawatt requirement of energy at peak times, with about 1.6 gigawatts of installed capacity. Energy is being brought in, the rest of nearly half of the energy is being brought in from other states, and it's being bought at a premium. So the average retail price for energy is about 5 rupees a unit. Very often it's been bought for between 12 and 16 rupees a unit from Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and of course then you've also got to factor in transmission loss. You're losing up to 50% in transmission, and forget even talking about carbon credits or other things, or the merit order effect for those of you in the industry. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that there's a need for energy, that the wholesale and retail prices of energy are completely out of whack. Normally we think of wholesale energy prices being less than retail energy prices, but they're completely in the other direction at the moment. So, on the one hand, again, coming back to this contradiction, there's a huge, Kerala, and this is certainly the way I talk about it when I'm talking with various people within Kerala, is that Kerala could be a hub and a model for example, clean energy, whether it's with large solar plants, even we've been pitching some floating solar plants, which is quite interesting, or where I think it's even better, would be more suited to Kerala, a kind of a predominantly distributed solar approach. There's huge potential for it. However, if the retail price of energy was put up even a little bit, you can bet your boots that there'd be some protests about it. So that is very difficult to reconcile when the man on the street, the common man, goes to look at whether he should put solar on his house and realizes that even with the subsidies that are available, it's a 10-year return on investment. And one thing that I've learned very much in Kerala is that the average person that you meet on the street is significantly more informed about both the financial side of it and also the technology side of it than my hometown of London. So which means that I've had to do quite a lot of study. So again, I think there are opportunities. I think that what I'd suggest for those of you who may be in this forum, there's probably some people who are more interested in larger projects, maybe larger wind projects or solar projects. I'd say that I'd exercise a lot of caution. There are possibilities to do things, but I would exercise a lot of caution because one reason is that it's the pricing and the cost situation that I mentioned. The second is that actually there's a lot of players, there's a very atomized market, there's a lot of people who are bringing in equipment from China, for example, are setting themselves up. And the other thing to take consideration of is the nodal agency for the Ministry of Non and Renewable Energy, which is called ANERT. Well, no, maybe I shouldn't, but it's let's say that their implementation of policies and the implementation of giving subsidies is not as effective as it could be, in my humble opinion. So I'll leave you to read between the lines for that. Okay, so professional services. I think many of you here are lawyers, perhaps accountants, working in professional services of some kind. There's a huge, huge opportunity for professional services in Kerala. I can say that having myself tried to find good legal advice, to find good accounting advice, that it's actually it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. So finding good, reliable, quality advice is a challenge. and people are willing to pay for it as well. But nevertheless, they see the potential to actually do something of a significant, project, say a transformational type of project within Kerala. Whether they do it or not and how effectively they do it is one question, but the fact is they're investing resources. Sending 5 consultants down to Kerala for 3 days is an expensive thing. So there's definitely some opportunities on the professional services side, I would say. Retail was mentioned earlier, and obviously we know the situation for retail in India at the moment. And what I can say is, again, this is my opinions, and being a retailer, or let's say a consumer of retail goods, and liking some of the niceties once in a while as well. It's obviously something that I have some awareness of. You've got in Kerala, there's very few what you might call like a Tesco's or something of that scale, a large retailer, whether it's groceries or non-food. So what that means is that, for example, if you look at some of what the equivalent might be, Spencer's, for example, which is a nationwide chain. My understanding is that Spencer's, as kind of a group within the broader chain that it sits under, is not profitable. It's been losing money for many years, and I think even at the moment, I think that has come down somewhat, but still, it's not profitable. Well, there's a lot of reasons. If you're doing retail, you need an economy of scale. Certainly that's what the likes of Tesco have made their money on. You build an economy of scale, you have supply chain efficiency, you get faster replenishment and so on and so forth. So where you don't have those big stores, then that's not the case. Now, recently in Kochi, Lulu have just opened a large shopping mall, and they've got all of the big brands, luxury brands, I can say, luxury and mid-tier brands, and it's the biggest news out there. So what I can say is, on the one hand, that retail, and certainly the prospect of foreign retail, if there's fear in India, there's definitely fear in Kerala, or there's, let's say, maybe not fear, but certainly a resistance to that. On the other hand, there's definitely a market for premium goods. I mean, people are definitely buying, or want to buy nicer foods, organic foods, for example. These are all being brought in from Tamil Nadu, from Karnataka. A lot of and we're trying to encourage, one of the things we're trying to encourage, for example, is the growing of organic fruit and veg in Kerala, perhaps instead of rubber plantations, for example, or cash crops, which basically means that you're dependent on some commodity trader sitting in New York or London on the price of what you're doing. And at the moment what's happening is a lot of food's being brought in from other states, which has both a quality and cost implication. So I think in the food side, in summary, there's tremendous opportunities for retailers. I think in the luxury goods side of things, there's a tremendous opportunity in many luxury goods stores, whether it's jewelry, clothing, luxury brands, even coffee. I mean, Cafe Coffee Day you will see all over Kerala, as you do all over India, for example. And in Cafe Coffee Day, if I get an espresso, it's costing me about 120 rupees. Whereas if I go to my local place down the road, I mean, not even 5 rupees. Yeah, exactly. So the brands and the premium end of the market, I'd say there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. Kerala's really being touted as a hub for IT. Technopark was the first IT business park or IT special economic zone in India, and it's a vast area. I think in many ways it hasn't grown at the same pace as some of the other centres, quite clearly, like Bangalore, for example. But nevertheless, there's a huge governmental focus on developing IT. I've worked in the IT industry, so it's a little bit familiar to me. And we're also, I should say, my organisation is sponsored by the largest IT employer in Kerala, a company called UST Global. What I can say is that it's a very interesting phenomenon, because actually on paper, the IT industry brings in significantly less than the tourism industry, for example. I mean, tourism is the main industry in Kerala that's bringing in revenue. So IT compared to tourism is it's not infinitesimal, but it's kind of near enough. At the same time, in Technopark, for example, you've got brands such as Allianz, you've got brands such as McKinsey, for example, Ernst & Young. All of these big players, they have offices which are primarily back-end, operational, IT service provision. So, for example, with Allianz, they're basically a captive service provider to the Global Allianz organization. That's one category, so foreign companies that have set up an office there. The other category is companies like UST, so Nest, for example, INAP, these are some of the companies. These are IT companies that are either providing services or building applications or doing both. Predominantly, I'd say 80+%, as again, rough kind of finger in the air, are service-based, but I think that's changing quite a lot. I think people see that the value, I mean, your general benchmark in the IT industry is that service should be yielding about 40%, and product should be yielding about 80% ROI. Although I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine runs an IT company there. He's a startup. He's an English guy actually. He set up a company 5 years ago, creating e-commerce platforms. And he's actually just sold his business, and he's now 30 years old, and he's just walked away with about £6 million in his pocket, and is about to spend the next 5 years surfing and travelling around the world in a boat. So if anyone says there's no opportunities in Kerala, I will happily introduce you to my friends. So there definitely are some opportunities in the IT space. The third area where I think for me there's the most opportunity is in what you might call the startup space. There's been a big push by the government to try and encourage startups and would-be entrepreneurs. And whilst, in my opinion, that hasn't necessarily been applied in the right way, it's been applied on giving space, for example. My personal opinion is we need to focus on the education system, and a lot of my work is around doing that. But nevertheless, it's suddenly become cool to be an entrepreneur. So I think many of the Malayalis here, I don't know, hands up, how many Malayalis here? Yeah? How many of you are engineers by training? Okay, there you go. Yeah, so this is traditional narrative of success is go out and be an engineer, my son, and life will be okay. Now, young Malayalis want to be entrepreneurs. They want to, they're inspired by Facebook. I'm on the board of a couple of companies, startup companies who I coach, and where I advise them, and they're great guys. And one of them, for example, they were 4 guys. They were all working at Infosys. They'd been there for a couple of years, and they just had enough. They felt like a cog in the machine. They decided to set up on their own. 2 years later, they've gone for a Microsoft accelerator in Bangalore, selected over 400 other startups, and we've just won the deal with Amazon, actually, which I'm very pleased about. But anyway, so there's a tremendous movement in that direction. So to summarise, in those 3 areas, I think that for those of you who are perhaps who represent big companies, who are looking to cut your costs of your operational IT, I think there's a tremendous opportunity in Kerala, because the cost of living is not as high as it is in Mumbai and Bangalore. That alone, and plus you've got a lot of talented people there who can work on things. So I think there's an efficiency opportunity there, which, by the way, I think has a shelf life, because I think those companies, as the cost goes up, will move to the Philippines or Burma or Gujarat or wherever is the next good place. In the second category of companies who are looking to, or foreign companies, are looking perhaps to invest or have a client to outsource your work to, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunities as well. It falls into the same category. In the third area, I'd say for those of you who are looking to invest, for example, in early stage funding, seed funding, venture capital, I'd say there's a huge amount of opportunities. I'd qualify it and say you have to be on the ground, you have to manage it, you have to understand your industry, you have to understand the product, and you have to have a very clear agreement with the people that you're working with. But the access to capital for young entrepreneurs is very, very difficult indeed, and it's one of the main areas where informally I support a lot of young entrepreneurs. I've got a couple of others, but I think probably I've got a little bit over time. Let me just mention two. I've talked a little bit about the startup opportunity. I did refer previously to the, let's say, what you might call the R&D opportunity. At the moment, in Kerala, there's arguably not much, well, let's say, there's a lot of R, but there's not a lot of D. There's a lot of research, not a lot of development. And I think that what's happening though is that there's an ecosystem, or there are a number of ecosystems that are starting to emerge. One of them is in the biotechnology space. I think medical devices, precision engineering, for example, ISRO, space industry, that's well established. And also, yeah, I think medical is a particularly interesting area. So those of you that are in the medical industry and want to find partners where you can either test ideas, build prototypes, measure prototypes, or measure the success of things, I think there's a very interesting opportunity. And I'll give you one example. I was approached a while ago by a Dutch gentleman who developed a solar-powered water desalinator. Very simple idea. He got a global patent on it. He built a prototype. It works. And he wanted to get the kind of academic ticks in the boxes to say, yes, it does actually work. It's measurable. It's tested and verified. Plus, he wanted to build some larger-scale projects. We took that to our partner at the Trivandrum Engineering College, which is a very well-reputed engineering college in South India, I'd say India-wide actually, it's a very well-reputed college. And they were just overjoyed. We immediately got a team of PhDs working on it. They're more than happy to get stuck in, and there was no barrier to doing it at all. I mean, they welcomed it with open arms. I take also in the medical area, I've been supporting this organisation, Sri Chitra Medical Institute, and they're again a very prestigious medical device development organisation. They do things like heart valves. I've got a picture on my phone of an artificial heart that they built. I mean, some incredible stuff there. But primarily, what their focus has been to take things that have been developed elsewhere in the world and make them cheaper. And what they want to do now, they've reached the point where they say, you know what, enough of that. We want to start creating stuff where we can sell to the rest of the world. And we're helping them informally again on that journey. Now, these guys, for example, they would welcome with open arms people who come to them and say, hey, look, we want to do some research, we want to test a few ideas out, we don't want to put a huge amount of money in, but would you be interested in coming and exploring a little bit? You'd be welcome with open arms, and I can say that we certainly have on that front as well. So, just to summarise, I think in Kerala, there are a lot of opportunities. I would exercise significant caution, where you're looking at either doing investments. I do believe that it's very important to have, I've certainly learned, very important to be very hands-on and very connected to what's going on the ground, to work with people. And I think also my recommendation for any of you either doing business or wanting to do business in Kerala is also to think about how to add social value in some way as well. Whether it's informal, whether it's giving a talk while you're visiting, or whether it's giving a training program, whether it's supporting a local group or whatever it is. And I think that in doing that, you'll actually demonstrate to the people that you're not just there to make a quick buck, and that actually you're interested in a long-term relationship. And what I find is that then people will respect you and also treat you in a way that as being a long-term potential partner. And I think that's, if you're looking at investing in Kerala, that's how you should think. Think for the long term and be a little bit patient and find good advisors.